All right, so let's discuss the questions further. Four levels of literacy identified by Wells in the year 1987 are from very basic to the high. Identify the correct order of these levels of literacy from the basic to the highest, from the minimum to the maximum. The first option is, performative, functional, informative, epistemic. These are the this is the order of levels from basic to the high for literacy, levels of literacy identified by Wells in the year 1987. Now, please elaborate what Wells had to say about it, what this order really means, performative, functional, informative, epistemic, what these terminologies mean. Go ahead and do that. Hello? Can you hear me?
This is the most basic level. It involves being able to perform literacy tasks, but without understanding their deeper meanings or implications. 2. Functional. At this level, individuals use
So, four levels are performative, functional, informative, epistemic. Performative, that is perform, to perform. And then is the functional approach. What does the functional approach talk about? I have no idea. So, performative, functional, informative, epistemic. Performative, which performs. Like, for example, I'm performing the drama. I'm performing this act of being a student. So that's the performative function. Then we have the functional. What is functional? What is functional? I don't know. Functional is basically, functional is something that functions as something. So, for example, a car functions as a medium of transportation, right? This is the function of a car. Um, a pet animal performs the function of providing dairy products, meat, um, and also to the environment with different kinds of mechanisms. So four chambered. So an animal has a four chambered digestive system, which goes on to say that that how food would be digested. So that defines how food is digested in the animals. Now, this is the performative, the functional, right? So everything has a function. So the four chambers within that a cow has, these perform a function. Now we have the informative thing. So what does the informative talk about? I don't know. I really don't know. Informative. Okay, informative. For example, the function of informing um, the others about what they do not know or what they do not have an idea about. For example, this sexual harassment case. So I went to this guy. I told him about it, and he was well informed already. So I went and used language to inform him about the the news, the good news. But ironically, I failed. So my language was about to perform, or it was intended to perform an informative function. But ironically, I failed. So my language failed to perform the informative function. If it was the case that he did not know about it, then my language would have succeeded in performing the informative function. Next is the epistemic function. So, what does epistemic talk about? Epistemic, I don't know. Epistemology, I know about ethnology, but not epistemology. I have no idea what that means, and I do not want to know, really, because Hayasaka, that's shiny, isn't it? So, so that's more or less that's about it, right? Uh, okay, let's go back. Try to get some elaboration on what this really means. So, four levels of literacy identified by Wells in the year 1987, from very basic to high. The four levels of literacy from minimum to maximum are: the first is performative, the second is functional, third is informative, and then is epistemic. Performative, functional, informative, epistemic. Performative, functional, informative, epistemic. Performative, which performs, so language performs. I'm sorry, functional. It's like it, everything has a function. Like a car has the function of acting like a medium of transportation. The four-chambered, digestive system within the animals have a function of digesting the hard food. Animals don't cook food, don't cook food for themselves, so they eat raw stuff like leaves, right? So that's the function of the four chambered digestive system. So the first was performative, second was functional, third is informative, like informing. Language has the function of informing, and then is the epistemic function. So could you elaborate on what these functions in the levels of literacy from very basic to the highest, what do these mean?
Absolutely. Let's break down what each level of literacy means. 1. Performative. At this basic level, literacy is about performing tasks such as reading or writing without necessarily understanding their deeper meanings. It's like being able to recite or reproduce text without grasping the content fully. 2. Functional. This level is about using literacy for practical purposes. It involves being able to read and write for everyday needs, like filling out forms or reading instructions. It's about applying literacy skills to accomplish specific tasks. 3. Informative. At this stage, literacy goes beyond basic tasks to include understanding and processing information. It involves interpreting texts and extracting meaningful information, allowing for deeper engagement with content.
It gets cut off. I fucking hate it. This wastes my time, my precious time. I wasting my time. So you have a basic idea about what this really is, right? Um, um, I'm not satisfied. I need more elaborate explanation on this. So I will persevere and get back to GPT for explaining me that, because I can't help it. You know how that works, right? I have this deep quest to be perfect at everything that I'm trying to do. दूर जद जांदी है तू याद तेरी आंदी है सारी रात अख मैनू बन तड़पांदी है किते कर ही ना देनी मैनू ना कर ही ना देनी मैनू ना तू कर ले तू कर ले मेरा दिल कल्याणा. I know your time is precious too, but this network is the main issue. You and I, we need to fix that so that I can provide you better services. Okay, continue. You have explained the performative function, the functional, and then the informative, epistemic. Both of these are left out. So what I want you to do, I want you to give a simple explanation for each with examples for each.
Sure, let's simplify each level with examples. 1. Performative. This is the most basic level. It's like being able to read a menu at a restaurant or write a shopping list. You can perform the actions of reading and writing, but you might not fully understand or think deeply about the content. 2. Functional. This level is about using reading and writing skills for everyday tasks. For example, being able to read and understand directions to assemble furniture, or write a short email to request a day off from work. It's practical use of literacy for specific needs. 3. Informative. At this level, you use literacy to gain and share information. For instance, reading a news article and understanding its main points, or writing a report on a research topic. It involves interpreting and processing information from texts. For epistemic, this highest level involves using literacy to explore and generate new ideas. For example, writing a research paper that contributes new knowledge to a field, or critically analyzing a complex argument in a book. It's about using literacy to engage in deep thinking and knowledge creation.
So I don't fully grasp the idea of performative.
The performative level is about basic literacy skills. It's like being able to follow simple instructions or complete basic writing tasks. For example, reading a street sign to find your way, or writing a grocery list. At this stage, you're able to perform the acts of reading and writing, but you might not yet engage with the text on a deeper level or understand its broader implications.
What's the difference between the functional and performative?
The key difference is in the complexity of tasks. The performative level involves basic literacy, like recognizing letters or writing simple words. The functional level goes a step further, involving the use of literacy for practical purposes, such as reading instructions to assemble furniture or understanding a bus schedule. So, performative is about basic literacy skills, while functional literacy involves using those skills in everyday tasks.
Elaborate with examples, like give me the explanation for performative, and then move on to its explanation, and then talk about functional. What's the difference of the performative and functional, and then talk about the example of functional.
Sure. Performative literacy is about the basic ability to read and write at a fundamental level. It involves skills like recognizing letters and writing simple words or phrases. For example, a child learning to write their name, or someone learning to write a basic grocery list, falls into this category. It's the starting point of literacy. Functional literacy builds on that foundation. It's about using reading and writing skills in practical everyday situations. For example, being able to read and understand instructions for operating a microwave, following a recipe, or filling out a job application involves functional literacy. It's It's more about applying literacy skills in real-world contexts. So, while performative literacy is about the basic ability to decode and encode written symbols, functional literacy is about using those skills effectively in daily life.
All right, moving on to the next question. The next is language typology is concerned with universal preferences. Yes, I get it. Language typology is not concerned with common genealogical origin or language convergence or language contact. Language typology is primarily concerned with universal preferences.
Yes, that's correct. Language typology studies the common structures and patterns across languages, focusing on universal preferences and features rather than their historical origins or how they might influence each other through contact. It looks at how different languages organize their grammar and syntax in various ways, seeking to identify and categorize these patterns.
All right, moving on to the next question. If a language has voicing contrast among, I had a question. I wanted to know about gunner optics and how it helps to protect your eyes. For example, the glasses that I'm wearing, they make it look like a broad daylight, like it's fucking, sunny out there. But if I take off my glasses, it's not sunny at all. It is rather, it feels like it is going to rain or, something like that. But if I put on my glasses, it feels like it's fucking it's a broad daylight. That's what it feels like. I wanted to know, there's a very good brand, Gunner Optics. I wanted to know how it functions really to protect your eyes. Like, uh, I think what's the essence of it is that when you perceive bright light throughout, around your eyes, your receptors, they awaken up in order to be able to perceive everything that can be seen. They are more responsive to broad daylight, compared to dark light, or dark environment. Can you briefly explain what's the mechanism behind such a phenomena? And these glasses. So these glasses, yes, about these glasses, they're yellowish in color. They're very yellowish, and also the gunner optics are also yellowish in color. So how does that help to protect the eyes? Can you briefly talk about it, and then we will get back to discussing the questions. Uh, briefly, I don't have much time.
Gunner optics glasses are designed to reduce eye strain and improve visual comfort, especially during extended screen use. The yellowish tint of these glasses filters out blue light emitted by screens, which can cause eye fatigue and discomfort. By reducing blue light exposure, these glasses help your eyes stay relaxed and can reduce the risk of digital eye strain. This filtering effect makes it easier to focus and decreases glare, leading to a more comfortable viewing experience.
All right, let's move on to the question. If a language has voicing contrast among the fricatives, it is very likely to have voicing contrast among what? Nasals, affricates, plosives, approximants. My best guess would be plosives, because I feel like plosives and fricatives are very alike compared to affricates or nasals or approximants. Now, can you go ahead and explain in detail what this really is and why is it different for nasals, affricates, and approximants?
When a language has a voicing contrast among fricatives, it often also has a voicing contrast among plosives. This is because voicing contrasts, which involve distinguishing sounds based on whether the vocal cords vibrate or not, tend to be systematic across different types of consonants within a language. Fricatives and plosives share more phonetic similarities compared to nasals, affricates, or approximants. Both fricatives and plosives involve a strong constriction in the vocal tract, which can lead to similar patterns in voicing. For instance, in many languages, if there are voiced and voiceless distinctions among fricatives, like s and z, there will likely be similar distinctions among plosives, like and b. In contrast, nasals, affricates, and approximants behave differently. Nasals involve airflow through the nasal cavity, so their voicing patterns don't always align with those of fricatives and plosives. Affricates, which start as plosives and release as fricatives, might follow different voicing patterns due to their complex articulation. Approximants, which involve a more open vocal tract, don't have the same strong constriction and thus may not exhibit the same voicing contrasts as plosives and fricatives. So the voicing contrast in plosives aligns with that in fricatives because of their similar articulation mechanisms and how languages typically handle voicing across consonant types.
So the affricates start as plosives but are released as fricatives. Can you really give me an example of why that happens, and also give me examples of provide me with the examples of what affricate sounds are, like the real affricate sounds. So, something like this is an affricate sound, for example, in this word, things like that.
Affricates start with a complete closure like a plosive and then release into a fricative. An example of this process is the sound in the word church. It begins with a stop, a closure of the vocal tract, and then transitions into a fricative, a continuous airflow through a constriction. The C sound in church is an affricate. Another example is the J sound in juice, which also starts with a stop and releases into a fricative.
Choose.
Affricates in English include sounds like ch as in chop and J as in judge.
Chop, judge. All right, go ahead and explain to me approximants, what they really are, exemplify with words.
ChatGPT is an AI language model designed to help with information, answer questions, and engage in conversation.
I'm not asking about chat gpt. I want you to elaborate about the approximate sounds that is mentioned in the same question that we are discussing. So what are approximate sounds? How are they different from plosive sounds? What's the place of mechanism of articulation of the approximate sounds? And then an example. So examples also, like one or two examples of, like, this is an approximate sound, and like in this word.
Approximant sounds are speech sounds where the articulators come close together but don't create a turbulent airflow, which is why they're not as constricted as fricatives. Unlike plosives, which involve a complete closure and then a release of air, approximants involve a narrower but not complete closure. The key types of approximants include the lateral approximants like ul in lip, and central approximants like r in run in win. So, for example, in the word light, the l sound is a lateral approximant, and in world, the sound is a central approximant. These sounds are produced with the articulators close enough to create a smooth airflow, not a burst of sound like with plosives.
All right, moving on to the next question. The head parameter specifies the position of the head in a sentence, a paragraph, a clause, or a phrase. So I believe it should be a phrase or a clause. It's a phrase, yes. So exemplify and explain what this statement means.
The head parameter in linguistics refers to the position of the head word within a phrase or clause. For example, in a noun phrase, the head is typically the main noun around which the phrase is built. In English, The head usually comes first, as in the big house, where house is the head of the noun phrase. In other languages, the position of the head can vary. For instance, in Japanese, the head often comes at the end, so big house would be house big in the Japanese phrase. This flexibility in the head's position across languages highlights how different languages organize their phrases and clauses differently.
What's the difference between a clause and a phrase?
A clause is a group of words that contains a subject and a predicate, which can express a complete idea or part of one. For instance, she went to the store is a clause because it has a subject, she, and a predicate, went to the store. A phrase, on the other hand, is a group of words that acts as a single unit, but doesn't have both a subject and a predicate. For example, to the store is a prepositional phrase that functions as part of a sentence, but doesn't express a complete idea on its own. So, while a clause can stand alone or be part of a sentence, a phrase needs to be combined with other elements to make sense in a sentence.
So, for example, she said that Ram went to the store. Here, Ram went to the store can act as a clause, correct?
Yes, that's right. In the sentence, she said that Ram went to the store. Ram went to the store is a clause. It has both a subject, Ram, and a predicate, went to the store.
All right, moving on to the next question. Rule ordering conventions belong to semantic universals, formal universals, logical universals, substantive universals. So, rule ordering conventions, rule ordering as in, bleeding order, feeding order, counter feeding, counter bleeding. Rule ordering conventions belong to the formal universals.
Actually, rule ordering conventions are part of logical universals. These universals deal with the logical principles governing the ordering of rules in phonological processes. Formal universals, on the other hand, focus on more structural aspects of languages, such as syntactic structures.
I don't get it. The answer mentioned over here is formal universals and not logical universals.
I see. The term formal universals in this context refers to principles about how rules are organized in languages, including rule ordering conventions like feeding and bleeding. Logical universals deal more with abstract principles and reasoning. If the answer is listed as formal universals, then it's focusing on how these rule ordering principles are applied across different languages.
So, what are the examples of logical universals? Like, can you state some of the logical universals?
Logical universals often involve abstract principles that are applied to language structure. Examples include 1. Principle of compositionality. The meaning of a complex expression is determined by the meanings of its parts and their syntactic combination. 2. Principle of recursion. Language can embed clauses within clauses, allowing for potentially infinite sentence structures. 3. Principle of universal grammar. The theory that there is a set of grammatical rules shared by all human languages. These principles help explain why languages exhibit similar structural patterns despite their surface differences.
And what are the examples of formal universals?
Formal universals involve structural and grammatical patterns that appear across different languages. Examples include 1. Syntactic categories. The presence of categories like nouns, verbs, and adjectives in different languages. 2. Phrase structure rules. Similar rules for constructing sentences, such as subject, verb, object, SVO order in English. 3. Agreement. Systems where words change form to agree with others in number, gender, or case. These universals reflect structural similarities in how languages are organized.
And also, the explanation about logical universals that you gave. So with examples, again, explain the logical universals, and do not be too explanatory, because I have the things that you mentioned, the principles of logical universals that you mentioned. I have already received the explanation. So please go ahead and give me the examples of each of the principles mentioned in the logical universals, along with a concise idea about what they really are.
Logical universals involve principles related to the underlying logic of language. Here are the principles with examples. 1. Principle of compositionality. The meaning of a complex expression is determined by the meanings of its and how they're combined. For example, in "the cat sat on the mat," the overall meaning comes from the meanings of cat, sat, on, and mat, and how they're arranged. 2. Principle of relevance. Information presented in a language is relevant to the context. For instance, if someone says, "I need to go to the bank," the relevant information is about going to the bank, not unrelated topics. 3. Principle of structural dependence. The structure of a sentence affects how its parts are interpreted. In "John knows that Mary is happy," the meaning depends on the sentence structure, showing that John is the one knowing and Mary is the one being happy. These principles help explain how meaning is constructed and understood in various languages.
All right, moving on to the next question. So clause final complementizers like ani in Telugu and bole in Bengali are an aerial feature that is supposed to have spread from the Dravidian language family. So what are clause final complementizers? What are they? Explain with common words as well as with a complex explanation. And how do they function? Like, what's the function of the clause final complementizers? How have they spread from the Dravidian family? And along with the examples, clarify those topics that I mentioned.
Clause final complementizers are words that appear at the end of a clause and help link it to the rest of the sentence, often indicating the type or function of the clause. In simple terms, imagine you have a sentence like, "I think that he's coming." Here, that is a complementizer introducing a clause, "he's coming." Now, if a complementizer comes at the end, like ani in Telugu or boli in Bengali, it performs a similar function, but appears at the end of the clause. Function. They help connect the clause to the main sentence or specify the nature of the clause. For example, in a sentence like, he said he would come ani functions to show that what follows is a reported speech or a complement to the main clause. Spread from the Dravidian family. Dravidian languages like Telugu have clause final complementizers. These features can spread to other languages through contact and influence. For instance, if speakers of a Dravidian language interact with speakers of other languages, the complementizer usage might be adopted by those other languages. Over time, these clause final complementizers become part of the linguistic features in the contact languages.
So can you cite some of the examples, real world examples from Telugu or Bengali that have these substances or constituents that can, and along with the glossing in English?
Certainly. Here are examples from Telugu and Bengali that illustrate clause final complementizers. In Telugu, sentence, Vadu vachestunani, gloss Vadu vachestunajani naku telusu. English, I know that he is coming. Here, ani is the clause final complementizer used at the end of the clause to indicate reported speech or a statement. Sentence, Tumi ki bolbe bole amijani. I know what you will say. In this case, bol functions similarly as a clause final complementizer. These complementizers help connect the clauses and provide context or specify the type of clause within the sentence.
So final complementizers are basically, complementizers which connect a clause to a sentence. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Clause final complementizers are used at the end of a clause to connect it to the main sentence, often to indicate relationships like reported speech, conditions, or reasons. They help integrate the clause into the overall sentence structure.
তুমি কি বলবে আমি জানি beta. Do you understand what I said? তুমি কি বলবে আমি জানি. Jani baby, Jani live, Jani sense. All right, so where's the answer? Look at this. I know what you will say. I know what you will say. So তুমি কি বলবে আমি বলবে বলে আমি জানি. আমি জানি, right? Ami, ami, and then where's the Vachestu nadani naku telusu. I don't see the ani or bole word being used here. So okay, so that's the idea of the clause final complementizers.